One.
Hello and welcome to Book Talk. During this segment, we are thrilled to have with us a true artist, a legend, a man whose music has been loved by millions of people around the world. Please join me in welcoming singer, songwriter, composer, trumpet player, and jazz musician extraordinaire, Louis Armstrong. I'm so glad you could be with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we just are thrilled. It's just an honor to have you with us today. I'm hoping that you'll feel comfortable in answering some questions for our audience and for our viewers.
I would love to do it.
Great. Well, Louis, maybe we could just start out with your childhood. I've always wondered, what was your childhood like?
Well, as you can... Oh, looks like I did my tie wrong here a little bit. Haven't had much practice lately. But as you can see from my tie, I grew up in the city of New Orleans, which is the best city in the world. And I worked several jobs to earn money to support my mom and my sister. I sold newspapers, I scavenged for tin foil and brass to sell to junk dealers, and I ran errands for adults in my neighborhood even. It wasn't easy to grow up back in the early 1900s because I was black. And black people were treated differently back then by the white people who were in power. We had to go to separate schools, ride in the back of the bus, which you probably already know about, and we had to use separate water fountains. We couldn't even go to the same restaurants as white people.
Wow. Well, what can you tell us, what was the best part of where you grew up?
Well, I'd have to say it was when 3 of my best friends and I used to sing on street corners. We were only 12 years old. We would pass the hat, and people would give us money for singing their requests. Sometimes we even danced, too, just so we could entertain the crowd.
Wow. Well, what inspired you to become a musician, and how did that inspire you?
Well, one of the nights we were out singing was New Year's Eve. One of my pals started shooting his cap gun to join the noise that was being made all around New Orleans. I had a gun too, but this one was for real. I took it out of my pocket and I shot it into the air. A policeman happened to be nearby and he arrested me. They sent me to reform school, which you'd think would be the worst punishment. But the truth is this: if I hadn't gone to reform school, I never would have learned to play the cornet. There was another person who really inspired me, and he was a cat from New Orleans named Joe Oliver. He still appears in the jazz books as one of the greatest jazz musicians of all times. Back when I was a kid, he showed me the ropes, encouraged me to do my best, and invited me to play with his jazz band in Chicago. When I turned 23, I finally took him up on his offer.
Did you always want to be a musician?
I was always interested in music. You see, New Orleans has always been a hot spot for those jazz cool cats. Even though I was too young to go into the dance halls and bars, I could sit on the street corner and listen to the music drifting out of those open doors. Jazz was definitely my favorite kind of music, and my main cat, Joe Oliver, played an instrument called the cornet. It looks just like a trumpet, don't you think? When I was 8, I had my first chance to buy a cornet from a pawn shop. Although it was beat up, I loved to blow on this cornet right here. I taught myself how to play, and I practiced every chance I got.
Well, what was it like being a black musician trying to make a living at that time?
Well, I already told you, we didn't have the same rights as the white people. It was hard. Black musicians would go on tour, and we would have to stay in different hotels from the white musicians who toured with me, often in bad parts of town. We also had to eat in different restaurants, as I already said. But the worst part, though, is that we would travel around the country and play to crowds of white people. One time, we were in New Orleans, and I wanted to play a show for our black fans. By the time we got to the show, the police had sent everyone home. They wouldn't even allow us to play for a black audience.
Wow, wow. Well, who was one of your favorite musicians to work with, and why?
Well, as I said, my friend Joe Oliver was my favorite musician. He was the king of playing the cornet, and I learned a lot from him. He's the cat who gave me my start and took care of me as if I was a part of his own family. Before I followed him to Chicago when I was 21, I didn't realize how hot he really was on the jazz scene. But they called him King Oliver, and that's exactly what he was. Everybody worshipped his talent. Those cats really knew how to swing.
Which instruments did you play, and which one was your favorite?
Well, I played a lot of different ones when I was at the Colored Waifs Home for Boys. That was my reform school. First, I played the tambourine. Then my professor told me I should play the drums. He told me I was so hot on the drums that he had me learn how to play an alto horn and a bugle. Finally, he gave me a cornet, which I played for many years. For some reason, though, I had always been weary of the trumpet. But when I was playing cool jazz with Jimmy Tate, you know old Jimmy, don't you?
Yeah.
He put me on the trumpet. I dug it so much that I played it for the rest of my life.
Did you do any other jobs in addition to being a musician?
Playing music was my first passion. I did love to write, though, too. When I was 35, I wrote my first book, which was an autobiography called Swing That Music. I had always wanted to write the stories of my life, and I did just that on my trusty old typewriter. It was quite an accomplishment because I was the first jazz musician to have an autobiography published. I wrote a few more books, and I was the first African American to host a national radio program. That helped other African Americans get more opportunities in showbiz, too. And I was in a bunch of movies. They would always write in a part to showcase my trumpet playing, and back then, black people who entertained were supposed to act silly. My personality was silly anyway, so it worked out, but I always put my music first. Some people didn't like the idea that white people always required us to look like fools because of our skin color. Let's go from 9 to 10.
Okay, wow. Oh my goodness. There's so many interesting things to hear from you, Louis. I'm so glad that you're here. Maybe you could answer one more question for us today.
I'm sorry that we're running out of time. I know
Yeah.
we had wanted to talk about 3 adjectives that I thought described me, but I think I'd rather play a little song for you if that's okay.
That'd be great. Well, what was your favorite song that you wrote and why?
I would say one of my favorite songs is Hello Dolly, and I'm going to play a little bit of that for you right now. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah!
All right. Where's my music man? There he is. He's heading on back.
He's looking.
Hello, Dolly. Just did Dolly. Finally glad you're back where you belong. You're looking swell, Dolly. I can tell, Dolly. Keep growing, you keep going down. I feel the blue way, the bad way. Oh, baby, too, when I win, yeah. Turning up rap colors and doing it with that blood. Now you never know away again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being with us this time. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me on Book Talk, and I can't wait to see the rest of the guests on your show in the next couple weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.